Welcome to the new year. This is Pastor Scott Conway with Quest Xeon. And as we kick off this new year, I'm talking about Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. When he's talking about wealth, he's talking about all of these different riches. And he notes, for the record, notice that financial wealth, material wealth, is last on the list. Among the things he kicks off with is a positive mental attitude and harmonious human relations. Now think about this incredible wealth of harmonious human relations. I teach in my relationship courses that 90% of your happiness or your misery will depend upon who you marry. That it's your most intimate relationship that is going to determine so much of what your life feels like to you. If you have your most intimate, committed relationships, the people you spend the most time with is harmonious, is filled with love, filled with joy, that you have this peaceful connection where you have inner peace and peace between the two of you, that you may agree or disagree, but you rarely fight. You're never mean or cruel between each other. That will tend to be a very happy, joy-filled life. And so this incredible wealth of harmonious human relations is truly one of the great riches of humanity, and one that perhaps we don't invest in as much as might be warranted. Well, here's a few places to start. They say, pick your battles. Well, one of the admonitions I recently made on social media is to pick fewer battles. Nope, that's too many battles. Put more battles away. Pick even fewer battles. Pick as close to no battles as you can reasonably justify picking. Because here gets me one of the things. If you fight less and you engage more, you have less animosity, less conflict in your life, what would that feel like? Now, some people thrive on conflict. They love conflict. But it's hard to create close human relationships with the people you are fighting. And sometimes people engage in conflict with the people that they married and go, okay, so in this relationship, who's winning and who's losing? And who wants to be married to a loser? So that means like even if you win, you're losing. So pick fewer battles. And here's one of the keys, even in the conflicts where there is a difference that needs to be addressed, ask more questions. Rather than go on offense and make it a fight, ask questions. Ask them about their position. Because if they have a point, if they can back up their position with actual points, you win illumination. And if they don't have a point, ultimately they may be arguing against themselves and they may win illumination. Now, here's a foundational point. It's easy to say, well, you ask people questions to like back them into a corner and get them where they can't answer the question. Well, here's a foundational thing is start with thinking through the same with yourself. Ask yourself questions like, okay, I have this opinion. And sometimes I have this judgmental opinion. How do I back that up? What is my point? If someone said, okay, well, you draw this conclusion, how do you know? How do you know that conclusion is right? How do you know the facts that back up the conclusion are right? How do you back up your own position? And what if you applied that standard consistently? Does it produce any undesired results? Or does it only work right here on this one issue? And as you look at so many ways that so many people pass judgment on others, we begin to see that sometimes, you know what? If we use that consistently, it doesn't always produce the result that we think. And in fact, if that breaks against us, I am in some ways guilty, sometimes more guilty, sometimes partially guilty of the exact same things I may self-righteously judge others about. Now, this has been me too. So there was one time years ago, my mother was checking out and renting from Blockbuster, which kind of gives you a little idea of how long ago that was, the DVDs of the series 24, the first season. And she was asking if she should just maybe buy it. Well, I told her, well, yeah, probably. Well, I knew full well that if she bought it, one of the benefits to me of her buying the season instead of renting it disc by disc was it would cost her a few more dollars. But when she was done with it, she would give it to me. And I realized that even though it was a sensible thing to say, and honestly, it would make sense for her to buy it, I realized that my motive was kind of mercenary. So I stopped into the store on my way home. I bought the first season of 24. I turned around and went back to my mother's, and I gave it to her as a gift. And I told her, the reason I'm doing this is that my motive in telling you you should buy it was really so I would get one for free. And that's wrong for me to do that to my mother. So I wanted to buy it and give it to you for free. So you watch it at your leisure. And then when you're done, you can give it to me. As I knew that she would, because she wouldn't really be interested in keeping DVDs in her collection, because she really only did that for her grandchildren to watch when she came over, and 24 is not the kind of thing for her grandchildren to watch. And so eventually, of course, it did come to me, but the key was I reversed the mercenary thinking. That I was thinking if someone else did that to me, if someone else had suggested that I spend my money, I invest my resource, I invest of myself for their benefit, and they cast it as, oh yeah, this is what I think would be good for you, but it turned out what they thought was good for me was what was in their interest, not what was necessarily in my interest, I wouldn't like that very much. And so I was guilty of something I wouldn't like other people to do to me. And so I learned from that. Now, do I occasionally still do things that I wouldn't like done to me? Yes, I do. I try to catch myself. I'm probably better at it than I used to be. But I suspect, this is probably true for all of us, that I have blind spots. And what are my blind spots? I don't know. That's the definition of blind spots. But a blind spot is when you're not aware of something that you're doing. But if you were aware of it, you might do it differently. That time I caught myself. I'm sure there's times I don't. And so when you look at yourself, you do the same thing with yourself. What is my point? What if someone used with me the exact same strategy or tactic I would use with someone else? What's my point? How do I back up my position? What are my facts? What is my logic? And am I too self-righteous in it that I just sort of assume I'm right because I'm right? And that's something I talked about before Christmas as the me pole, that my way is the right way. My way is the common sense way. My way is, of course, correct, but I may or may not be able to back that up. And being able to be more open to the we of humanity and say, okay, well, I have a point. They may also have a point. One of the ways I would explore their point is to ask more questions, ask them to define what they mean by that. And how do they know? What are their facts? What is the logic? And that means I should be prepared for the same thing. What is my position? What are the points I use to back up my position? What are my facts? What is my logic? How do I think this works? And does my position, do my points lead to any unintended consequences? Do they lead to any undesired results? Are these actual principles, in other words? Now, in politics, for instance, when we think about some of this, we see this pretty dramatically, that we are quick to judge the other for some conduct, but not as fast to judge our own side. And in fact, one of the things I constantly look for, because I'm third party, so I watch both major parties do this, so I don't really have a horse in the major party race, but I rarely, and in fact, I'm trying to think how often I've ever seen someone say, well, if my own side did this, I'd have the exact same demand that they need to change. That's not okay. What's much more common is we're quick to excuse our own side, especially if the other side does it too, to say, well, you do the same thing. Well, that means then we should excuse the other side from doing it because we do the same thing. So is it okay for me to do because they do it? Well, if so, that means it's okay for them to do it because I do it. If I'm a Democrat and I go, well, the Republicans do that too. Or I'm a Republican and say, well, the Democrats do that too. I'm saying like, okay, well, then you're saying it's okay for the Democrats to do it because the Republicans do it. Or it's okay for the Republicans to do it because the Democrats do it. Is that really what we want to say, that it's okay because? Or is this that neither side should be doing it? Well, I can't change the other side. I can only change me. And I can change me, and I can demand my own side change. That's like the Democrats have power over Democrats. The Republicans have power over Republicans. The opposite party can keep telling the other side what they ought to do and what they ought to agree with all they want. It's not your side. You're demanding that they change, where we can change us. We can't change them. We can try to get agreements with them that maybe we can all do this together, but ultimately I don't get to decide for them. Just like me as an individual doesn't get to decide for you. So what we're actually doing here is arguing for where we have no power and can only blame, and arguing against where we do have power. It's kind of curious, don't you think, how often we have argued against our own power. We only argue where we are powerless. We only argue where we can be judgmental. We only argue where we can be condemning. We only argue where we can blame. All those places we can say they're worthless, they're stupid, they are unworthy, they are bad, they are stupid. When the only place we have power is our own side, our own selves. What if we argued for our own power? What if rather than blame, we looked for where we have the power to make a difference? And let's bring this home to our own individual lives. What if we argued for where we can make a difference in our own lives, especially our own selves as individuals? And then as I grow and I become a better individual, then to have that influence in my closest relationship, in my primary relationship, and maybe the second tier of primary relationships in my own family, in my own household, in my own business, in my own department, in my business, in my immediate communities that I interact with regularly, in my own church, in my own place of worship, my own place of work, my own place of play. And then expanded from there, where I actually have power, where I can actually have control. I can control myself. I can make choices for me. In the places I have influence, rather than just argue for where I'm powerless and all I can do is sit on my high horse in judgment of others. What if I sought out that personal power? There is almost always something we can do to make things better. So find the winning game. And say that again, find the winning game. Pick fewer battles, since way too many battles are only a losing proposition, because winning the battle doesn't actually change anything. So suppose you and I get together, you're either major party. Well, you can bet me as a third party person, I have views that agree and disagree with both major parties. And suppose you and I get into an argument, a fight even, a vicious conflict over some issue, and I win the issue. What happens to our relationship? Have we gotten closer, more intimate? It's possible that you might respect my razor wit and my vast knowledge, but are you going to like me anymore? Are we going to be friends? Are we going to be closer friends? Or maybe might you want to talk about fewer things with me? If winning doesn't actually change anything, if me winning the point doesn't create some concrete improvement, then I was just arguing to argue, win or lose. And just having the fight is losing in the relationship. Well, husbands and wives fight all the time. Why? Because the issue in this moment is more important than the damage being done to the relationship. And very often we make that judgment, the same way we make a judgment about interrupting, that when you interrupt, you are judging that this thing I am interrupting with is some balance of more urgent and more important than the thing going on right now. And there's some things we are more willing to interrupt than others. So if I am at a wedding and I am officiating the wedding and some thought pops into my head, I'm not going to interrupt the vows I am conducting to do the ceremony with this idea that just popped into my head, because this is important. But if we're having this casual, largely meaningless conversation and something springs to mind, I might jump in and interrupt with it. And so we have this rubric that we use about what's important. Well, it's the same thing with fighting over issues in relationships. We have some kind of internal rubric, but because we don't think about it, we tend to just kind of feel our way through. And that's one of the reasons we fight the way we fight, is in that moment, the intensity of the emotion is all we can really see. It's all we can really experience. We can't see the bigger picture past the intensity of the emotion. And so we are fighting so much over the issue, not because we don't care about the relationship, but because right here, right now, in this moment, we cannot even see the relationship. And sometimes we can say things that can't be unsaid. Sometimes we can do things that can't be undone. If we can keep all these things intact, in mind, we can keep the relationship intact by keeping any conflict in this larger context and allow us to build the relationships that matter to us. Now think about people and the importance of people. So one of the areas I teach in is in leadership, and in business, people are so important that 70% of the time someone leaves a job, it's over people. Most commonly, it's over the leadership decisions that the leadership people are making at the policy level that affects people. 70% of the time, people are leaving people, not the work. And one of the ways you can often tell is they will go find another place to work, very often doing similar work. It wasn't the work, it was the people. People are so important that leaders tend to leave leadership over problems with an average of about 6 people. That means I could be a division leader, I could be a senior pastor, I could be a team captain. And if I'm having problems with an average of about 6 people, I'm just done. And leaders quit leadership over problems with an average of about 6 people. I learned that from John Maxwell ages ago, and he has tons of experience in leadership and dealing with various organizations, both volunteer and business, with leaders leaving leadership. And as I led with, 90% of our happiness or our misery is directly connected to the people we have embedded most intimately in our lives. The people we marry, the people that we live with, the people that we keep close, the people that we see often. We tend also, this is a Jim Rohn lesson, that we tend to become the average of the 5 people we make the most important to us. The people whose opinions matter the most to us, the people who we value, the people we spend time with, the people we go out of our way for. And we tend to become the average of these people. People. It keeps coming down to people. All of which just means that we should consider in our goals people. Now think about like all of this stuff professionally. One of my things is I'm a lawyer. So when I became a lawyer, I graduated from high school, spent 12 years in basic education, plus kindergarten, call it 13 years, but we'll call it 12. Then I go to college. I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice administration. All right, so 4 more years of education. Then I went to law school, 3 more years of education. Now, let's even suppose we only count law school as my professional training to be a lawyer. I think that's 3 years of full-time school aimed at being able to pass this test, the bar exam. And if you count all of it, I spent 7 years of post-high school general education to get educated enough to qualify to sit for the bar, pass that test, and be a lawyer. As a lawyer, every 3 years, I have continuing education that's due. As a real estate broker, every 4 years, I have continuing education that's due. I'm trying to pass the bar exam in another state, and I'm finding that passing the bar after 3 years of law school is way easier than passing the bar after 30 years of practice in one given state in some fairly narrow areas of law compared to everything's on the test. And I've only practiced a lot in a few of those areas. And curiously enough, on my first try, the areas I scored the lowest on are the ones that I actually practice in, because I know the practical, what we actually do. I don't know the academic, what's on the test, and I know the laws from my state and the procedures from my state. I don't know what's on the test. That's not what we actually do when we actually practice. Those are the hair-splitting academic questions we ask for tests. Real lawyers just look the stuff up because it changes and ebbs and flows all the time. Well, that's an awful lot of time and upkeep and continuing education and continuing training for a job, for a thing to make money. But is that what's the most important in my world? Professional development? Is that what life is about? Would I be heartbroken if I couldn't be a lawyer anymore? Now, it might impact my income, but would I be heartbroken if I lost my profession? Well, that's what retirement is. You surrender your profession. You just retired. But relationship development, years of schooling and learning from mentors, learning from experience, continuing education, learning new things for a job, for a career. Maybe invest time, energy, and resources into the same thing in learning, in taking classes, attending seminars, going on retreats from mentors, paying attention to my experience, and not just even my direct experience, but the experience of those I can observe around me, getting some ongoing inputs, learning new things, exploring new things for people, for relationship, for growing, not as a professional this or that or whatnot, but for growing as a man, as a friend, as a romantic partner, as a husband, as a father. Maybe an investment of some of my time in these things would be worth my time. I would spend it to be worth earning more money. Why not be worth it to build more intimate relationship? I would invest my energy. Maybe I should invest some energy. I would invest certainly some financial resources, some of my available free time. Maybe I should invest some money in that, invest some attention, some focus there, in love, in relationship, in learning more who I am, in seeing where I show up in a way that maybe isn't good for a relationship, like maybe a little too much self-righteousness, maybe a little too prone for conflict, maybe not keeping the relationship in mind when there's issues at stake. Maybe blaming the people I'm in relationship with like they're the villain and it's not the problem that's the villain, and the whole hero, villain, victim format. Maybe invest some time in understanding marriage and understanding parenting and just understanding people in general. Because ultimately this people thing, even if I just look at it as a professional thing, if 70% of the time I'm likely to quit a job is over people, if I'm likely to quit a job over having problems with an average of 6 people, even if I'm a leader, even professionally, this people thing is a worthy investment of my time, is a worthy investment of my money, is a worthy investment of my professional development. But when I step out of my professional, the flip side, let's not forget the flip side. If 70% of the time, my best people on my team, if I'm a leader, 70% of them, they're going to quit because they want to get away from me. They want to get away from my leadership. I had probably better have some focus on the people thing. If I solve the people thing as part of my leadership format, I might solve up to 70% of the people leaving my leadership because I clean up my leadership on the people side. But you step outside of the professional development and you think about 70% of your professional leadership development is a people thing. If I step into my personal relationships, that's 100% people. You really can't lose by getting better at this people thing. And one of the best places to start is look where you might be doing damage. And one of the places you're most likely to be doing damage is engaging in too much conflict, picking too many battles, pick fewer battles. No, that's still too many battles. Pick even fewer battles than that. Start off with what are the issues important enough that they really do need to be brought up. And if they're irrelevant things and they're not going to make any difference one way or the other, why are you engaging in battle over it? So you can even start off with the irrelevant ones that make no difference whatsoever, set them aside. And then of the relevant ones that this kind of needs to be addressed. Does it have to be a fight? Most things, honestly, don't have to be fights. I have been training in martial arts for half a century. Most things don't have to be physical fights. Most engagements don't have to result in physical self-defense. And even when I do engage physically, which I've done 4 times total in my whole life, 3 of the 4 times, I didn't even have to hurt the person. I didn't have to hit them. Pressure points, finger locks, a spin and a pin. And 26 times I've engaged in an explosive, already dangerous, sometimes already violent situation. And 22 of the 26 times I talked them down, where physical technique was legally and morally justifiable, but not necessary. I engaged, but I didn't choose to engage as a battle. I chose to engage as a peacemaker, to resolve the situation, but not having to make it a fight, even though I would have been justified in letting it be a fight. What if we engage that way with people? Just pick fewer battles. First off, decide if the issue is even worth anything. And then if it is there a non-battle way to address the issue? And the simplest way to do that doesn't require any training is ask questions. Let them be heard. Really listen, and listen to understand them. And if they really don't have good points to back up their position, they will stop engaging because they don't have answers. And let their own lack of answers be that path to their own illumination. And then if they flip it on you and they ask you questions, how well can you back up your own side? And then it can be a conversation rather than a confrontation. It can be something that protects relationship rather than destroys relationship over points, over issues, over differences. And then invest of yourself in this whole relationship thing. Invest of yourself in having more harmony with people. Invest in yourself in aligning with God. It says God is love. That is right out of the Bible. God is love. And so we look at love is patient, love is kind. How can we come to glorify God as perfectly loving, perfectly patient, perfectly kind, and confess our mismatch, lay it down, let it go, and walk away from the mismatch to be more patient and be more kind? We are told that love is not jealous. Love does not boast. Love is not arrogant. And that we can confess where we are these things. We are senselessly jealous. We are boastful, trying to puff ourselves up to look better at other people's expense. That we do think more highly of ourselves sometimes than we ought. And to be able to lay these things down and also walk away from them. Because ultimately, a key wealth we all seek is relationship. My relationship with myself, my relationship with the people around me. And if I can have such a healthy self-relationship that all I need to do is open up my heart to others and love others the same way I love myself, and that if I have a healthy self-love, then I will have a healthy love for others. If I experience the healthy love of a healthy self-love, and when others are loving me, I can recognize a match or a mismatch with a healthy love. And then we build healthy relationships, and then we can build more intimacy. We think of intimacy as into me see, that I am seeking to see into you. Who are you? And who am I? And I share who I am with who you are. And we build more intimacy in our friendships and our connections, and certainly in our marriages, in our relationships with our children, that we can see and we can understand one another. And then we can create these bonds that even in the professional realm is 70% of what makes or breaks an employment relationship, and 90% of our happiness or our misery in our personal lives. So seek the wealth of harmonious relationships with people. Be an oasis, seek harmony, and be assertive in your pursuit of that oasis and that harmony. To be your highest and best self and to show up with love. Yes, that's Ohana. To be family, so that we're all on the same side. And ultimately, for the most part, we all want the same things. And every once in a while, yes, there are things that are worth a conflict. And where it's truly worth a conflict, by all means, don't hesitate to stand up. And don't hesitate to engage in that conflict where it is truly warranted. But pick fewer battles. And even where the issue is worth standing up for and having a fight over, see how not fight you can address the issue, so that we can have the treasure. we can have the enormity of the blessing of harmonious relationships with other people, and that we can connect, and we can connect in relationship. And as we get past the fundamentals of general relationship principles with all people, get to know people as individuals, to have greater intimacy, seeing into people in their individual lives as individual people, as whole people with whole lives, as we connect whole person to whole person, and we look where we can weave together whole life and whole life, and enjoy that wealth. That even in the mostly secular book, Think and Grow Rich from Napoleon Hill, he says is one of the great riches that is more valuable than wealth. God bless. This is Pastor Scott Conway with Question.